Good evening. We have good news and then just news. I've actually just happened to run into a audio visual engineer tech wizard guru yesterday, and he was very nice enough to come out today and work on our sound. And I don't know about the sound in here. Can y'all hear? You can hear me, can't you? Okay, we got noise in here. He pulled up our stream from last week before, 2 or 3 weeks ago, and we started comparing the two, and he worked for 2 hours smoothing our sound up. Our sound's better, our stream's better, our picture's better, everything online is better. This is be a first really significant test run, so you guys watching the stream, give me some feedback and let me know. I really don't want to go back and watch this video. I don't like watching myself on video, but I need some feedback. See how this sound's going. Dudley's really good about letting me know how it does, and I'm thankful for that. We are in 1 Samuel chapter 17, David and Goliath. We've been waiting all Samuel to get here, right? We've been wanting to get to chapter 17. Now we're going to look at it, and maybe, Goliath is kind of a major character in the chapter, so we're going to have to talk about him. But as far as the book goes, the emphasis that I want us to catch and make sure that we don't miss is, well, it's a tale of two kings. We have Saul, the anointed king, who was wanted by the people of Israel, right? Rejecting God as their king. They desired their own. And God anoints for them through Samuel a man in Saul who stands head and shoulders above the rest. He's taller, he's handsome, he looks the part of the king. He looks like someone you would want to follow into battle, right? And then we have the anointed David, chapter 16. He's youthful, he's ruddy in appearance, he's a shepherd boy. He's the opposite of what you would expect to see as a king for Israel. And so in the text today, what we're going to see, we're not going to make it all the way through the chapter. I wasn't near that fast over at Perrytown. We're going to start seeing some contrast between these two men, between Saul and David. And along the way, we're going to talk about Goliath a little bit too. So we get into verse 1 here. Oh, and another point, one that Hunter picked up on last week, and we actually won't get there, but it's curious as we try to date what happened in the last chapter. At the end of chapter 16, we have David going to work for Saul, playing the lyre for him, playing music to soothe his evil spirit, right? At the end of this chapter, Saul doesn't know who David is. He wants to find out who he is. Whose son is this? Who is this guy? And so we'll have to talk about that some, but we won't get there tonight. But you'll come across that in your reading, hopefully, when you go back and read the chapter again for yourselves. All right, verses 1 through 3. Now the Philistines gathered their armies for battle, and they were gathered at Succoth, which belongs to Judah, and they encamped between Succoth and Azekah and Ephes-Dammim. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered and encamped in the valley of Elah and drew up in a line of battle against the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on the mountain on one side. Israel stood on the mountain on the other side with a valley in between them. Now let's see if we can wrap our minds around the geography here. Just so you have sort of a reference in your mind where this is taking place. I got Jerusalem over there. Usually that's sort of a good landmark for us. We're basically west and a little bit south of Jerusalem, not just a long ways, 15 miles, maybe 20 across there to the valley of Elah. But more importantly, you see a little bit further east, Ekron and Gath. These are capital cities of the Philistines and the coastal plains. The Philistines typically occupied the coastal plains down against the Mediterranean. And when you started getting into the hill country, if you can make it out on this topographical map, well, that's where the Israelites typically kind of maintain control. And so the battle down here at the bottom of the screen at the Valley of Elah, well, they're fighting over their property line. It's the barbed wire fence, separating their property, and that's where they're fighting at. And so we have the imagery of the two armies. This is the Valley of Elah, and little too much wording on here. I borrowed this slide. But to the left on that hill, on the left upper part of the screen, we have the camp of Israel. The right-hand side of the screen, we have the Philistine camp. And in the middle, running through here, we have the valley. I actually like this image better. I think it helps us kind of wrap our minds around what's going on. And mountains in Israel aren't nearly much mountains as it's something you could see driving around here. The back roads, they're just sometimes hills, sometimes they're pretty steep. They're not just super tall, not all of them. But you have the valley with a stream that runs through it. Stream bed's dry most of the time, other than rainy season, and it'll flow pretty good. So right now we're talking about a time of year when the stream bed's probably going to be mostly dry. Got those nice smooth stones in there, the ones that have been left by tourists over the centuries. Not many left, I don't imagine. But you see, they're going to draw up, they'll be facing each other across the valley, and we have a scene set. So now here in verse 4, there came out from the camp of the Philistines a champion named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. He had a helmet of bronze on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. He had bronze armor on his legs and a javelin of bronze slung between his shoulders. The shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron. And his shield bearer went before him. They didn't make movies back then. We didn't have 8mm film yet or anything like that, but the author does a really good job of painting a picture for us, doesn't he? This is a big dude. Let's check out Goliath by the numbers here. We got it. 6 cubits in the span is going to put him somewhere around 9.5 feet tall. That's pretty tall. How tall are these ceilings in here, you reckon? I know they're over 9, but they're pretty good. Okay, nobody knows. Bad reference. See, the ceilings over at the Fellowship Hall at Perrytown are 9 feet. We was talking about how you'd have to duck in there, but he could probably reach up and touch the ceiling in here pretty easy. I once walked into a shoe store, been years ago. Shaquille O'Neal, I think he just went pro, and there was a life-size cardboard cutout of him in that shoe store. And I walked up next to it. He's up here, about 300 pounds, 7'2", 7'3", something like that. Makes you feel pretty small. Now, Shaq would feel that way if he were to walk up by Goliath. He'd look up at him and feel pretty small. This is a big guy. He's got 5,000 shekels worth of bronze, a coat of his mail, the mail on his coat, which is just basically thin leather with little bronze scales stitched to it. 125 pounds worth just in that alone, not counting the helmet, not counting the javelin, not counting the bronze. And I can't remember what those I almost called them leg irons. I can't remember what those irons were that covered the calf. They had that on there as well. Serious amount of weight. Got a spear like a weaver's beam, a big piece of wood. We're not talking about a broomstick. We're talking about some serious heft on this spear. And the tip of the spear weighing 15 pounds, and it is iron. That way it won't have any problem penetrating the bronze scale that's on the other guy he's fighting. So we have an image here. We have huge warrior decked out for battle. He's ready to fight, right? He looks the image. If Saul is the image of a king, Goliath is the image of a warrior. Now, Goliath is of Gath. Interestingly enough, Goliath is usually thought of as one of the Anakim or the Nephilim that we read about in the Old Testament back in Genesis. In fact, you can sort of, again, I wasn't going to spend a lot of time on Goliath necessarily, but you can sort of trace Goliath's lineage a little bit, and it seems as he would be one of those guys of the Nephilim. Incidentally, I believe it was last summer, and I pulled the article up again and read it today. A grave site found in the Transjordan, the other side of the Dead Sea, on the Syria side of the Jordan River. And it was two female skeletons in the same grave, and they were over 6-7 feet tall apiece. And they dated the skeletons back to this time period. So that was pretty interesting to have a little bit of physical proof. And of course, when Bible scholars see that, we go to the text of scriptures. We say, yeah, this is part of this particular people, a very large people. And so we have Goliath. He is monstrous. He's huge. He would make, millions playing professional football or basketball today. Professional warrior from his youth, intimidating. If you were going to draw the picture of the ultimate fighter, Goliath is who you would draw. Now we have the challenge. Verse 8. He stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why have you come out to draw up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us." The Philistines said, "I defy the ranks of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together." When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Okay, this is not out of the ordinary. This kind of thing actually happened quite a bit. Champion of one army facing off against the champion of another to decide the battle. A lot of times the leaders would come together and decide, rather than lose mass quantities of soldiers, loss of life, we'll let champion fight against champion and a winner take all, and we'll decide it that way. So this is not abnormal, this sort of scenario. What is rather telling is verse 11. Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine. They were dismayed and greatly afraid. Do you think Joshua would have been afraid? The size of this one man. Joshua was one of the spies, right? He and Caleb came back, gave favorable testimony. Yeah, we need to go on into the promised land. The other guy said, no, there's giants over there. We can't take them. The theme of divine warrior. Joshua encountering the angel of the Lord in full battle armor on the way to Jericho, right? And the angel of the Lord gives Joshua the battle plan. This is how we're going to defeat Jericho. And then we have that theme throughout the text. When Israel is faithful, God fights on their behalf. And here we have Saul and all Israel dismayed and greatly afraid. They're a far cry from leaning on the God of Israel to fight their battles, aren't they? All they can see is little old me fighting against great big old Goliath. They're not thinking in terms of my God fighting against them. They've got their faith. Their faith is greatly lacking, is missing. And that's the scenario we're entering into. Verse 16, 40 days the Philistine came forward and took his stand morning and evening. Numbers are always significant. It's interesting to see how some pop up. We just worked through Jonah recently, right? 3 days and nights in the belly of the fish. How long was Jesus in the grave? Three days, 3 nights. So a lot of numbers. Noah and the ark. How long did it rain? 40 days, 40 nights. So here we have 40 days with Goliath coming out, taunting the armies of Israel. Okay, so I already said this was normal. Champion fighting against champion. But what I didn't say was the king is the champion. The king would give someone in the army the opportunity to step forward and show his valor. If some man, as his mighty warrior, steps forward and wants to go fight on behalf of the army, on behalf of the king, if the king decided that he was worthy, if he thought he had a chance at winning, he would give him that opportunity. 40 days Saul has avoided fighting against Goliath. He should have already taken up the mantle and been out to face him. Saul is Israel's champion. Except we're starting to learn, we're seeing with Saul, even from the very beginning in his anointing as king, that Saul tends to avoid the spotlight. He tends to avoid taking charge, taking authority. Even at his third anointing, right, when all of Israel comes together and casts lots, they couldn't find him. He was hiding amongst the baggage, amongst the coats, and somebody had to go fetch him and bring him. Whenever God told him to annihilate, to sacrifice, to destroy all of the Amalekites, yet he brought back King Agag. He brought back the best of the spoils and the best of the livestock, and then blamed it on the people. He was afraid of what the people might say, might do. And then what's very telling is Samuel's response to him: even though you are little in your own eyes. We have Saul, who seems to be, maybe he suffers from a complex. He has low self-esteem. Whatever the case may be, we see a lack of faith in Saul, in his body language. We hear it in his words, even as he's trying to make an excuse to Samuel. We were going to take the goods back to Gilgal. We were going to sacrifice them to the Lord your God. Remember that? And so we have Saul, who just comes across as lacking faith and lacking courage when it comes to facing off against people, whether it's in battle or just in general. And so for 40 days, the Philistine, Goliath, is coming down. He's taunting Israel, and their champion, their king, the reason they wanted a king, to defend them from their enemies, to protect them, to develop a standing army, and he will not go face the threat. He will not go face Goliath. And then in walks the anointed one. Verse 17, and Jesse said to David his son, take for your brothers an ephah of parched grain, these 10 loaves, and carry them quickly to the camp to your brothers. And take these 10 cheeses to the commander of their 1,000, and see if your brothers are well, and bring some token from them. So we have Jesse sending the youngest son, right? All right, now full disclosure here. Every time you read about Jesse, you think about Uncle Jesse, right? You go straight to Dukes of Hazzard. I know I'm not the only one. It's Uncle Jesse. Uncle Jesse said to David, so we got David taking supplies to the brothers. He's taking cheese to the commander of the army. He's going to take some. He's going to pass it out to other soldiers who may need some rations or something. Jesse's being very thoughtful and maybe even buying a little favor for his sons, perhaps, right? And he wants to know how his sons are doing. Bring back word. Let me know how your brothers are doing. This is kind of the purpose of the trip. And that brings David into the picture, right? This is the avenue. This is how David gets to the battle. This is the reason he's there. Now we're back to Israel and Goliath in verse 24. All the men of Israel, when they saw the man, Goliath, they fled from him and were much afraid. And the men of Israel said, have you seen this man who has come up? Surely he has come up to defy Israel, and the king will enrich the man who kills him with great riches. Will give him his daughter and make his father's house free in Israel. And David said to the men who stood by, what shall be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? The people answered him in the same way, so shall it be done to the man who kills him. So David overhears some soldiers talking, right? Soldier talk. I think, this thing's been rocking on for 40 days now. Goliath is still coming out, taunting Israel. David hears these soldiers talking, and he says, well, yeah, somebody's going to get a reward for whooping somebody here. Let me double check with these guys over here and see is this really true? Is this what I'm hearing? Kind of thing. He gets some affirmation. Yeah. But we like what David says here, right? In verse 26, who is this uncircumcised Philistine? Who is this guy who is not one of God's chosen people? He is not a child of Israel. He's not a child of God. Who is he that he should defy the armies of the living God. Now, David sort of sounds like a teenager here, doesn't he? He's bowed up, ready to go. And his faith, listen to his words, the armies of the living God. I'm going to claim that Uncle Jesse brought him up right. David has faith in God, and whatever his background is, whatever his raising is, he understands where Israel's authority comes from, right? Or he wouldn't talk like this. He wouldn't have this understanding that Israel is relying on God for their sustenance, for their protection. And so he is incensed at the idea that this Philistine could be taunting Israel. I like that. I like the little bowed up version of David here in the text. And then you have the older brother. I've got older brothers, so I kind of relate to David here. Eliab, his eldest brother, heard when he spoke to the men, and Eliab's anger was kindled against David. He said, "Why have you come down? With whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your presumption and the evil of your heart. You've come down to see the battle." David said, "What have I done now? It was but a word." He turned away from him toward another and spoke in the same way, and the people answered him again as before. The older brother, "What are you doing here? Who's tending the sheep? You need to get on back." That's kind of the understood idea. You need to get on back to the sheep. I know why you're here. You wanted to see some fighting. You want to try to get in. He's the little brother trying to get into big brother's business, older brother's business. David's excuse, "I didn't do anything. All I'm doing is talking." It wasn't anything but words. But then he, does like most younger brothers do. You ignore the older brothers and you take up what you were doing before, right? That's what David does. He keeps on talking. He wants some affirmation. Y'all are sure? Somebody defeats this guy, riches, a daughter, freedom. That sounds good, right? Verse 31, when the words that David spoke were heard, they repeated them before Saul, and he sent for him. And David said to Saul, "Let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine." And Saul said to David, "You're not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you're but a youth, and he's been a man of war from his youth." We've been trying to discern between last chapter and this chapter, just how old is David? What are we talking about here? Before all the older brothers were brought in with Jesse before Samuel, for Samuel to look at them and anoint one of them as king. But David is left out to tend the sheep, wasn't even brought in. So he's young enough to not even have registered with any of them that he might be the one anointed king, right? Here, Israel's dragging all men to come fight against the Philistines, and yet he wasn't brought in, so he must be under draft age at this point, right? So he's going to be a younger guy. He's not going to be fully grown. We're going to say he probably hadn't made it all the way through puberty yet. He's probably not full size grown up just yet. He's still but a youth. And that's the reason he can't win the battle. Saul, remember? Saul's looking at Goliath, and he's weighing man against man. And that's what's keeping him sitting there in the tent on the throne rather than going fighting, right? Saul here, Goliath here. Now he sees David, little David, shepherd boy David here, Goliath here. You are a youth. He's been fighting since he was a youth. You're outmatched. You're outclassed. He's got more experience. He's got a little bit of size on you. You can't fight with him. You're not ready for that. So here again we see Saul measuring men by their stature instead of by their heart or by their faith, which is exactly what God warned Samuel about when he went and picked David to anoint him, right? Don't measure him or don't view him. I don't view men. I don't measure men like you do. You're measuring with your eyes. I'm looking at his heart. And we have the same thing taking place right here. David is going to be estimated unable to fight against Goliath. Yet, we see that he does. All right, we're going to stop right there because that's as far as I got over at Perrytown. We're going to pick up here, verse 34 next week, and that puts us right at the beginning of the battle. And we'll want to talk about this just a little bit as well. I'll just stick this in there. There's another thing we notice between Saul and David, is while Saul is seemingly looking for reasons to not go fight against Goliath, David is demonstrating why he should go fight against Goliath. All right, we'll pick up at verse 34 next time. You have any thoughts or any questions about the text so far here in chapter 17? All right, we'll put a peg in it right here at verse 34 and pick up here next time. It does sound a little louder though, doesn't it? Sounds like it's a little louder to me. But is it okay? Is it clear enough? Got a weird anything to it? Okay, as long as it sounds fine. What I come to learn today is that whatever it sounds like in here doesn't mean that's what it's going to sound like in the stream. It can be totally different. I did not know that.